BBOR, Black Box, Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. So, the holiday season has begun, and we just finished Thanksgiving, and now the family has gone their separate ways, and I could finally get back to some things that only I and our family like to do, and that would be checking out some things like aliens in Egypt, exploring some ancient Egyptian alien theories. Now, we've talked a little bit about ancient Egypt on this channel. We mentioned something about the magic and mysticism of ancient Egypt during a segment we used to do called Occult Mondays. And we also covered a few things about aliens, such as perhaps the Travis Walton incident from Arizona. But we really haven't had too many uploads dealing with things that are associated with the paranormal, or just dealing with things that are more precisely about ancient aliens, so that I think this is something new that we could perhaps be exploring. Now, I have to tell you, I am somewhat of a skeptic with this, but I don't throw out skeptic things to kind of challenge anyone's deeply held belief. It's more or less because people are talking about this stuff in documentaries, people are talking about this stuff on the History Channel. The answer is aliens for everything, remember? So, it's appropriate to respond to those things. I mean, people put content out and people respond to it the same way I welcome anyone to respond to me here. But one of the things is, I started watching this documentary called Aliens in Egypt. I found it on the Roku channel. I mean, I turned on the Roku channel for the first time this year, and it's November. You know, it's like, it's something that's just there, but I didn't even glance at it for 11 months. Just turned it on. I was watching this documentary about aliens in Egypt. And they made some things that I noticed that are very consistent with the types of ancient explorer theories or even the ancient alien theories. So let's go through a few of the things. I have to confess, though, this is a very one-sided film. It's something that's trying to be persuasive as opposed to descriptive and informative. It is trying to persuade you that aliens built the Great Pyramids. Now, did that really happen? Well, one of the things that I heard in the film was the ancient Egyptians did not have any knowledge of geology. I mean, I hope I heard that correctly. You know, I don't have a transcript in front of me. I'm watching a documentary, and they said that the ancient Egyptians did not have knowledge of geology. Therefore, they wouldn't have known how to move the stones. They wouldn't have known how to create the building blocks necessary to form the ancient Egyptian pyramids. That was one of the points that they brought up. And as someone who has casually looked into ancient Egypt in the past, I'd have to tell you that that's flat out incorrect, because geology is often associated with rocks. But remember, geo means earth. Geology is the study of the earth. Geometry is to measure the earth. So with something like geology, the ancient Egyptians had a very good understanding of earth and materials. The name of ancient Egypt was Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Sometimes it's written K-M-T, Kemet, meaning black, referring to the dark sands of that surrounded the Nile, the sands and the soil near the Nile. Really, the soil, because it's the Nile that was the source of life. So black was even the color of fertility in ancient Egypt. That's why they painted certain statues black. And some people tried to say they believed that the black Egyptian hypothesis, that the ancient Egyptians were black Africans. That's why certain statues were painted black. But in reality, black was a color of fertility in ancient Egypt, and they could differentiate between the soil types and develop agriculture, and that ties into geology, and it ties into an understanding of formations and an understanding of how, well, the earth can function in different ways. So that was something that I noticed, and furthermore, if someone's going to make a claim that the ancient Egyptians had no understanding of geology, you can disregard everything that I previously said. And you can also sort of look at it from this way. Look at it as, how has that person, have the documentary filmmakers examined everything about ancient Egypt? Do they have absolute certainty of every single thing that was ever thought in ancient Egypt? And they evaluated all the information. They're like, okay, there are zero mentions of geology. I mean, I'm quite skeptical of that. So it's like, and the reason I wanted to talk about this was, you see these things formulate quite frequently in the paranormal encounters where someone is kind of leaving a type of they're leaving a space where an explanation should be, so they just assume, well, it couldn't possibly exist because I haven't found it. Mostly, I don't find this from documentarians. Mostly, I don't find this from YouTubers. Mostly, I don't find this from writers. I see this in casual conversations with people. Or I should say, I hear it in casual conversations, rather, that people are just like, well, I didn't encounter it, therefore it must not exist. I don't really accept that because, well, it's called learning for a reason. It's not like we know everything all the time. I mean, we don't have absolute knowledge of practically any subject. So, it's called learning for a reason. We don't necessarily know everything, so we can learn new things. And I know it sounds silly when you explain it like that, but they're saying that the ancient Egyptians had no knowledge of geology, so they wouldn't have been able to learn about stone formations and wouldn't have been able to learn which types of stones were more suitable for building the ancient Egyptian pyramids. Therefore, aliens must have done it. I don't accept that. Do you? That's the first challenge question. The second major point that was brought up really revolved around something that we see time and time again when it comes to the ancient alien hypotheses, and it is that they recovered this artifact in ancient Egypt, and this is a podcast, so we just have to be a little bit descriptive of it, where the wings of a bird are placed above the bird, and it looks like an airplane, meaning that they had been exposed to a certain new type of technology. I mean, I confess that they had this kind of artifact. It did look like an airplane. The wings are not connected in any sort of traditional organic manner. The wings are not connected in any way that symbolizes a living bird. It kind of looks like kind of one of the older models of an airplane, but it's an ancient Egyptian artifact. Therefore, the ancient Egyptians must have been involved with someone who had some sort of exposure to superior technologies or flight systems and flight devices. Okay, my response to that one would be, are they certain that the ancient Egyptians were only ultra-realistic artists? I mean, when you look at the artwork of various places around the world, I would tell you, go to a Native American totem pole, and does that look 100% like something that is realistic or ultra-realistic? I mean, I don't think so. I think a lot of the features are exaggerated. Or how about some of the things to do with Chinese dragons? Are those completely realistic? Or how about the stories of talking animals that we find from all over the world? Are those 100% realistic? I mean, would you hear the stories of the talking animals around the world? Maybe something like Aesop's Fables or the story about the tortoise and the hare? I mean, are people saying those things because, well, I guess in the past animals used to talk, but now they don't anymore? Or are people being creative? Or are people allowed to do things with creativity and artistry that they can't normally do with real life? Are they allowed to create things in a different way? Does the artist not have liberty? I mean, can craftsmanship not push the boundaries of things? Can you not just create something different for a reason? Or just solely for the fact that, oh, I wanted to make a bird, but now we got the wings across? There could be a different explanation, or perhaps an artist was just doing something different. But I think it's an extraordinary leap between the facts to say that, okay, because some sort of ancient Egyptian artwork looks quite different than the natural things that have been described, therefore it must have been aliens. Well, they must have been observing the aliens to do this. Well, they must have been recreating an alien airplane or an alien spaceship or an alien flight device. They must have learned about these things from aliens. But I think that that is one of the other kind of tactics that is used in a lot of conspiracy theories, and we've talked about countless conspiracy theory books on this program. We talked about, A Culture of Conspiracy by Michael Barkin, Why People Believe Weird Things by Michael Shermer, Conspiracy by Daniel Pipes, The United States of Paranoia by Jesse Walker, Voodoo Histories by David Aronovich. I can go on. I mean, we've covered this subject a lot, and this is one of the most consistent things that has been talked about how people are kind of making large connections between the facts that shouldn't necessarily be there. In short, the connections between some of the hard information is somewhat fictitious. Or not necessarily fictitious. I mean, it could just be kind of inaccurate. I mean, how do you achieve certainty that because the kind of designs that are used in ancient Egyptian artwork are similar to some of the technology that now exists in the 20th century and the 21st century, well, like, just because it's similar, why is your explanation aliens? It sounds more like there could be a variety of explanations, and the people making the documentary film do not seem to know which one it is. But it's like, one sort of, first I would like to ask you, that second challenge question, why do you think certain pieces of artwork from the ancient world are able to reveal things that are very similar to technological advancements that we only got in the 20th century and the 21st century? Why do you think that is the case? Well, like, were the ancient Egyptians actually seeing the future or using aliens, or how did it happen? How are they able to have artwork that depicts things that didn't exist yet? I mean, like, that's just kind of something I'd like to ask. Now, the third thing that I would like to talk about is one of the pieces of kind of information that we get in a variety of ways, and that is the ancient Egyptians had depictions of things that appear to be a person using a mechanical drill. This is the same thing. It's an advancement in technology, but with this one, it's not so much of like somebody designed a bird that looks like an airplane. It's not like that. It's more just like someone has designed a tool or has a picture of a tool, like kind of like an artist's recreation of someone using a tool that seems like it is much more advanced than the time. And we've encountered this before. Like, there's a very famous one called the aluminum wedge that has been apparently found with some prehistoric bones that were 2 million years old. And the Gaia Network talks about this all the time, about how they found a hammer preserved in some prehistoric material that is, once again, much older than any sort of prehistorical estimates about humans using hammers. How did these things get there? Was it aliens or was it something else? And my response to that is just very simple. It's this pattern that we've talked about in the past, about using the unknown to prove the unknown. And you have a depiction of something from ancient Egypt. You have a picture from ancient Egypt, and you don't know what it is, and your response is, well, it must have been alien, some things that you aren't certain exist. You don't have certainty of the alien's existence, and you don't have certainty of what you're seeing in the picture. So you're using the unknown to prove the unknown. And it's not exactly a logical fallacy. Some people might first try to say something like that, and I wouldn't use the word fallacy. I would not. Instead, I think it's something that is a little bit more similar to, uncertainty. And that's where we can kind of leave it at that, because if you're going to use the unknown to prove the unknown, you could be completely correct. You could be right. Like, if we're going to talk about UFOs, like, you see a ball of light in the sky, and, well, I don't know what that is. Well, maybe it's an alien spaceship. I also don't have certainty that alien spaceships are in the sky at that time, or that alien spaceships are even present on Earth. But if that is indeed an alien spaceship, well, then that was completely correct. That was an accurate statement. The observer might have just been lucky if they just see a ball of light and they're like, oh, it's an alien spaceship. I mean, maybe more like what you would call an educated guess rather than just being lucky 100%. But at the same time, okay, you got these depictions from ancient Egypt, and they're saying that they don't know what they are, and the explanation they've provided is something whose existence they aren't certain of. That's using the unknown to prove the unknown. And these are the tactics that are used time and time again by people that are kind of pushing some of the more far-out theories. And once you sort of go through the literature, as we said we've done on this channel, you can really see that a lot of it is formulating a pattern, and then they're kind of using certain pieces of information to try and find out, how can that fit into their thought pattern? How does that fit into their thought pattern? And I don't really think it's the most advisable thing when you're trying to deal with something like history. Because unless we're going to be entertaining some of this quantum physics stuff, we do have a consistent historical narrative. And for somebody like me, I've always wanted to know the answer to the question, how or what actually happened? What actually happened and how did it happen? Like, what is the definitive answer there? It's not just, well, what is somebody's perspective on this? What does this one person think about history? Also, what are the real historical events? You know, it's like, I mean, yes, I do find value in stories. As a person who lives in the Western world, I find an enormous value in stories. And so many times you hear people say, well, it's a better story. And I think that there's a certain degree of value in that. But at the same time, what actually happened? Who built the ancient Egyptian pyramids? There is a definitive historical answer to that question. Was it people who were kind of dragging rocks through the desert and then they moved them up ramps and they placed them the way that they are still today in Giza? Or did aliens do it? And all I have to say is, we have laid out kind of sort of a more of a conspiracy literature response to the kind of challenges that they're talking about in Aliens in Egypt. We've talked about some of those things. And it seems that it is very possible that the people who are promoting the ancient Egyptian alien hypotheses are using some of the same tactics as conspiracy theorists, where they're kind of using the unknown to prove the unknown, or that they don't seem to quite understand that just things can be different because people are allowed to be different. We don't have always live at the constant state of normal, which probably doesn't even exist. There isn't only one definition of normal. Normal can change from time to time. And people can also have creative liberties and they can design things in a different way. And there might be similarities to the between the ancient Egyptian artwork and the airplanes, but as Noam Chomsky famously said, who also wrote a book about conspiracy theories called 9/11, which focuses on one specific theory, of course, or one specific set of theories, rather. But when he was talking about that one, he said, coincidence, contradiction, and the unexplained are all part of life, but they aren't significant of any fact or conclusion by themselves. It depends on the nature of each individual coincidence or contradiction or unexplained phenomena about what is the relevance of this. Just like you found a contradiction, or you found an unexplained question, that doesn't necessarily mean you can jump to the conclusion of saying, well, it was the aliens that did it. So that's one of the things we also have to bear in mind when we're kind of examining these things. And I think it's really kind of a challenge to look out. How are the people kind of creating this in the literature and the documentaries that they put out? So there are a variety of things that we can notice about how the people who are coming up with these theories and these hypotheses are formulating their responses. Last challenge question: who do you think built the Great Pyramids, and what do you think about ancient Egypt in general? Please just drop any comments below. That's all from me, and until next time.